Hello, everyone. So, our last discussion was centered about primary key. All right. So, we did some entries into the table to show us the differences, and we said we could connect or combine more than more than one column. Okay, so we could combine two or more columns for a primary key, which I said it's also called composite keys. Okay, so because so now we are trying to see some other aspects of this primary key. You see that we had to manually put in the one, two, three, four, and the rest in on this column. All right. So the idea is more like this is an employee table. So company XYZ is employing, all right? And now when Maxwell came on board, he was recorded into the database, and then we have Cynthia, we have Blessings, and so on and so forth. Okay, so but the challenge here is that as the data keeps on increasing, or as we have more persons coming on board, the data entry person would have to confirm from the for the last number or the last ID that was registered, and then would come back and do an insert command into the table. So if the last ID was 4, the person, the data entry person, is going to do something like 5. So you would always have to go back to the table to check, to insert the record, and so on. All right. So now that's not what we want. Okay. So is it possible? Is it is it possible? So we're trying to ask, is it possible to automatically fill in the primary key column, okay, incrementally? All right. So let's say incrementally. So yeah. So can we do this incrementally? The answer is yes. It is very, very possible. Now, that is called auto increment. Okay, that's called auto increment. However, auto increment is a MySQL keyword. All right, this is the keyword that MySQL recognizes, but we are using Postgres. Okay, so in Postgres we call it's called serial. All right. So that means when I am creating my table and I use the term serial on a particular column, is going to automatically, add those numbers. So I don't need to manually impute the numbers. All right. So it's not restricted to just the primary key column. Okay. Anywhere I place it, it would automatically add the number serially. All right, that's what it means. Okay, so now let us create a table. Okay, but first of all we have to see how it's going to be represented here. So we are removing this was to explain the composite. Now let's do this. Employee ID as the primary key, then we could just put serial. Now, because it is already numeric, okay, we are not expecting a serial for any other data type but numeric. So this would conflict. So I would remove the integer here. All right. So it would be just the employee ID serial. So you are saying that this column called employee ID should be incrementing serially. Okay. So it should be incrementing without the user input. All right. So let us create this table. But before we create the table, we have to drop this table because it's the same table name we are using, so it will conflict. It's not going to be created if we don't drop the already existing table. Okay, so I would use my drop table employee and voila, it happens. Okay, so what's the next thing to do here? I would start with my magic command and then I paste. Oh, okay. So let me go back to my notes, copy and paste. Right now, when I run this, it should work. So it says done. Okay, so let's do some experiments. All right, now I bring this code. I want to, so I wouldn't need to declare the employee ID any longer because the system is going to take care of that. So I'll just remove this. Okay. So I'll just deal with the first name to the last. Okay, to the next. Okay, now let me do the insert. Now it's went through. Okay, and let us see what is going to be displayed. Select all from employee. And it shows me, it automatically represents a one there. So it shows me this employee ID is one. Okay, so let's continue. Let's do something else and let's select, let's say we are bringing in another employee whose name is Byron. And um, yeah, so let's say its surname is Hausa, and let's say, okay, that's a middle name. So somebody, and then the age, let's say maybe 30, and then this person is from Niger. All right. So now when we do this, it goes, and when I rerun this table, it shows me number two, the second employee. This is his name, his middle name. This is his record. Okay, so it's increments. It continues incrementing. All right. So let's do some form of bulk um, insertion. So let's say we have. Let's do this. Um, say this person is this person's name is Tina, and the and the surname is Max, and Tina is, yeah, let's just Betty, and Tina is from where? So let's say Tina is from France, okay, and then we have another. Let's just add one more record, okay, and this, and this, and next thing. So maybe this is Grace, okay, and this is Grace, and this is, and she is from 20, and she is from Ghana. All right, so when I do this, it tells me three rows affected. Okay, so let's go back to this table and see what it gives us. So it has arranged the information as expected. Okay, so it has arranged the information as expected. You can see that Byron is the same record here, but it did not conflict despite the fact that the primary key was placed on the employee ID. So because the primary key was placed on the employee ID, so if there is a kind of duplicate in other columns, it would refer to them as, it will not refer to them as duplicates. Okay, as long as the key, the column that was declared as the primary key, is not having the same numbers, it won't take them as duplicates, because this person could be a different person from this one, and the only way for you to know is that their IDs are different. Okay, so these are unique persons, although they have the same kind of profile or similar kind of profile. Okay, so now you can see that it has saved the data entry person the time to start checking the database to see the last ID, so that he or she could increment it in the code or in the query language that is being used. So that is no longer needed with the invent of the serial keyword in Postgres and autocrement if you're using MySQL. All right. So that is for auto incrementing. Oh, okay. So now there's something else that it's similar to the primary key, and that is called unique key. Okay, so that is called unique key. And this is not very easy to explain, but it's easy to understand because the unique key does the same work with the primary key. Okay, the unique key does like the same work. Like if the differences are kind of very internal. All right, so the unique key does the same thing as uniquely. Okay, uniquely identifying the key or the record in a column. Okay, so that's what it does. It uniquely identifies the record. Okay, so now what is the difference? But before we start discussing the difference between unique key and the primary key, let's just see what happens. Okay, with the unique key. Okay, now let us create a table and let us use the unique key. Okay, so this is going to be, let's let me say, okay, so instead of the primary key here, so instead of the primary key here, so you would use sorry, would use okay, so instead of the primary key here, we would use unique. Okay, so we use unique. So this, it comes without the keyword. Okay, so now as usual, we would just have to drop the table. Let's not drop the table. Okay, let me just create another table instead of always dropping that table. It's just so we shouldn't have like too many tables that we're using. Okay, so oh yeah, okay, so let's just try another table, and let's say this table is let's just call it employee two. All right. So now when I do this and I do my skill, then I enter it, it tells me done. Okay. So let's see. So what we are saying is the employee ID is still serial, and we are saying it is unique. So let's just run some things here. So let's do this. Okay, let's put in this record here, and we have skill, enter, three rows affected. So let's see what we have. We have the SQL, then we have select all from employee two, right? So we have, okay, so I didn't do that here. So okay, so we do this because the record is empty here. It's empty because we did not insert anything into it. We used it without modifying that name. Okay, so now let me run this. So we have the information populated in this table. Okay, so now let's also try and insert a record. Let's insert a record here, and let's do the employee ID, and let's do two here. Okay, so let's see what will happen. So it tells me duplicate key violates unique constraints. Duplicate key violates unique constraints. Okay, so because I have already made a constraint here that this key is meant to be unique. All right, so it tells me key 2 already exists. But if I used, say, key 4, what is going to happen? It's going to work, all right, because it doesn't exist. 4 doesn't exist. So when I rerun this cell, shift enter, it will show me that that record has been entered into the table. All right. So the unique key is, I would say that, now let's talk about the differences, okay? Because almost in short, everything you can do with the primary key, you could do with the unique key. All right. The only difference is it's not everything that you can do with the unique key that you can do with the primary key. Now, let me break it down. For the primary key, you can only have one primary key in the entire table. All right. So let's do primary key. Let's say primary key versus primary key versus unique. Okay. So now what we are saying is you can only have you can a table can only have a table can only have one primary key. All right. But a table can have, okay, let's continue from there, but can have multiple unique keys. Okay, so now I can only have one primary key in my on my table. Okay, I can only have one primary key defined in my table's definition. Okay, but I can have more than one unique keys because the unique keys are for the columns. So I could say something like, okay, I want this to be unique, I want this to be unique, and I want this to be unique. All right. So I could say that. Okay. So now, what are the use cases? Okay, like say examples. For example, let's talk of an example where we could use something related to this. An example is a record. Let's say there's a record of names, say emails, phone numbers, okay, and other data. Now, there's going to be an ID, all right? So I would use my primary key on this ID. Okay, so this is like a distinct information. So I will use my primary key on this ID. But as I have applied my primary key, I cannot use that primary key any longer. Okay, so the next thing is emails should actually be unique and phone numbers should also be unique. So I could also just use my unique key here to just declare that it should not accept duplicates here. All right, it should not, as whenever a record is coming in and the email is the same, even though the primary key might be different, but even though the ID might be different, but the email is the same, please reject it. That's what it means. Okay, it says please reject it. All right, but if you have dissatisfied and dissatisfied, is going to accept it. All right, so let's do a little example. Okay, so now we have to create a table, and I think I have to drop I have to drop this table. Let's drop this table. I think, do I have any drop statement somewhere? Okay, we could just go ahead and create some cells and drop drop table employee two. All right. So now, yes, sir, I didn't add the SQL. Okay, so it's done. All right. So now let's see what we can do here. I think I should just reduce the information so we'll not have so many. Okay, since we have a template to for insert, so I could do this. All right, and I I could do this, copy this, and paste it here. Right. So we've created this table. Okay, so we are saying that the first name is meant to be unique, and the last name is meant to be unique. Okay, let's just assume this is not like a very original case scenario because you could have names, or let's just drop this table and use something better. Okay, so what is it saying? Employee two does not exist. Okay, okay, so let's say let's say we want to create this table, and let's redefine it here, and let me just remove a couple of things here. So just have, so let's assume our unique is let's make this email. Okay, let's just make this last name, and then let's make this email. Okay, and email two is a voucher. Okay, then maybe we'll make, say, phone number, and okay, so let's do, okay, so let's just make it an integer, right? So now we, this is not very necessary, so I could also, let me just remove this. Okay, so we just, to show us, let me put the unique somewhere else. Let's make the unique in around this phone number. Okay, so let's create this table. Okay, what is it saying? What is it saying? Okay, so I was not meant to put a comma on the last item. Yeah, so it is done. Okay, so now let me insert, let me do some form of insertion, and so we are going to insert into this employee tool. All right, and what are we inserting? The, okay, so the ID is serial. Okay, so let's just keep that. First name, last name, email, phone number. Okay, so let me just continue the next line. So the values should be, say, first name, Byron. Okay, Byron, last name, okay, email, just something, 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 something. All right, phone number, let's say 1234. Okay, so that is done. So yes, so now I want to check what is on my table. Select all from, say, employee to, right? And yep, so I have this. Okay, so now let's say I want to impute another record. I want to impute another record, and this record is going to be, remember our constraints, we're not meant to repeat the phone number, right? So yes, the phone number. So let's assume that this is a different person, and this is something, something, if the email could even be different. Okay, but the phone number is the same. Let's see what happens. It tells me duplicate key violates the unique constraint. So you could see that the, because this thing is a serial, the employee ID is serial, so it will definitely be unique. Okay, it's not going to duplicate here, so it has passed that. The max ray and the other part has passed that, but when it came to this part, it still rejected the entire record, because what I selected here is, or it already exists. That's what is written here. Key phone number already exists in the table. Okay, so because it already exists, my unique key has spotted that out. Okay, so that means we could have records and, have something like maybe phone numbers or emails. So if there are other records that you would want to put some constraint on aside the primary key constraint, then your unique key is the best. So you could use the unique key to combine with the primary key, so it doesn't really replace the primary key. Okay, so it's more like an assistant to the primary key, because you cannot apply the primary key on individual columns in multiple times. The only thing you could do with the primary key when it comes to combination of columns is to concatenate the columns together. All right. So concatenate. Okay. So when we are talking of the composite, when we are talking about the composite part of the primary key, more like we talked about something like this, that if we could have something like, say, um the say primary key. We could have something like primary key, and the primary key is going to have the employee ID, and it could also have the first name, for example. All right. So now what happens is it concatenates them. So if the employee ID is one, and the first name is Byron, what it does is it joins them. Okay, so it will now be one Byron. So what it will do, it will check if I add this primary key, if I add this employee ID with this first name, will it be the same thing as this? Okay, so if the previous record was a combined, if the previous record's combination gave me one Byron, and the next record combination is also give me one Byron, then to call it duplicate, and it will reject it. But if the next combination was like one something, not Byron, then it will accept it because it is not exactly the same with this So the highest you can do with primary key when it comes to multiple columns is concatenation. Okay. So but you cannot skip and write another primary key for a different column, another primary key for a different column. No. So in those kind of business use cases, that is when the concept of unique comes into play. Okay, so that is the major difference. Okay, there are other differences. Okay, the unique keys could accept null values. Unique keys unique keys could accept unique can accept null values. Okay, but primary key does not. Primary key does not. Okay, so I can put null values. I can put null I can put null values in unique keys, but I can put null values in a column or declare it in a column that has the unique constraints, and unique will still accept it. In short, I can put multiple null values. Unique does not see a null value as as an entity. So even though I put a null value and I put another null value, it will still accept it. I think we should just do something little about that. So now let's say the phone number here, which is where the unique constraint is, it's null. Okay. So if I do enter, it goes in. Okay. So if I go back to this place and I check, I realize that it is showing me none. Okay, so because of the null value, so here in the notebook environment is converting that to none. Okay, but if you go to the, like, say, your PG admin, you will see the null here. All right, now say I want to put this again into the system, it still accepts it. Why? Despite the fact that there is a none already on this column, it is because the unique constraints sees null as it as a possibility. Multiple people can put null values, okay, as phone numbers. It doesn't see it as a constraint. But if you are trying to do that for a primary key column, it's not going to work. Okay, it will tell you, it will give you an error. All right. So if you, the primary key does not accept null values, but a unique key accepts null values, and a unique key does not detect null values, multiple null values as duplicates. No, it detects every null value as a unique value. So you can put as many null values as possible on the column, and it doesn't throw an error. All right. So those are the major differences between the primary key and the unique key. So we have discussed a lot about primary keys. We've talked about primary keys. Well, we've talked about primary keys. We've talked about composite keys, which is more like concatenation. Okay, so we've talked about unique keys. unique keys, that they are very similar with the primary keys. Okay, with just few differences. All right. Then then something else is you whatever you can do with primary key. Remember, I said whatever you can do with primary key, you could do with unique key. So your unique key could also give you the composite kind of information. All right. So you that means you could have unique key and you combine two columns together to give you a concatenation. Okay. So you could also use unique key to get that kind of information. All right, so we have primary keys, composite keys, and we've also discussed the differences between primary keys and composite keys, and unique keys. Okay, so this would be all for now. So we would continue in our subsequent lectures to manipulate our table and connect more with our database. All right, thank you very much and do enjoy your stay.